Welcome to The Glitter Effect, a podcast dedicated to shining a light on the movers, shakers, change makers, and all-round living legends of our communities who are making a real difference. Today, I'm honoured to be joined by Matt Cronin, the co-founder of the Pat Cronin Foundation and proud father of Pat, whose life was tragically taken in an act of senseless violence in 2016. What began as an unimaginable grief for Matt and his family has evolved into a powerful movement for change. I'll say that again. What began as an unimaginable grief for Matt and his family has evolved into a powerful movement for change. Through the Pat Cronin Foundation, Matt has dedicated his energy to educating young people, raising awareness about the dangers of social violence, and spreading a message of courage, kindness, and choosing to walk away. This is a conversation about heartbreak, healing, and how purpose can rise from pain. It's about the courage it takes to keep showing up and the ripple effect one life can have when it's honoured with love and action. So grab a cuppa, settle in, and let's hear from a man who is spreading his glitter in the most meaningful way possible. Matt Cronin, a very huge welcome to The Glitter Effect.
Thanks for allowing me to share Pat's story with you today.
I'm absolutely thrilled to have you, Matt. Let's dive straight in. For those, there's plenty of people who are listening who may not actually be aware of what the incredible things that you do and what the Pat Cronin Foundation is all about. Can you just give us an insight into that?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's 9.5 years since Pat went out on a Saturday night and never came home. And, you know, there's not a day that goes past where we don't miss Pat and we don't think about him. And, you know, he was the youngest of our three children. We have Emma, our oldest, who's now 33. She's the mother of Riley, and she's expecting child number 2. Maybe by the time this goes to air, we might have our second grandchild, which will be wonderful.
That's lovely.
So, yeah, Lucas is our second, who's 31, and he's got a beautiful girlfriend, Ellie, and no children yet, but who knows? They've got a fur baby, so that's positive in their life. And then we've got Pat, you know, who's he was our baby, and you know, Pat will always be 19. If he was still with us today, he'd be 28. So so that's a little bit about you know our family. You know, I'm dad, and Robin's mum. So we're a family of 5, and we'll always be a family of 5.
Yeah. Now tell us what you've said. Tell us the story about the reason behind Pat being forever 19, and share that horrendous story that this has all come from.
Yeah. Well, as I said, you know, Pat went out on a quiet Saturday night. He and Lucas had just played their first game of senior football together at the Lower Plenty Football Club, and they were just so excited about what lay ahead. You know, after that game, you know, they came home and, you know, Lucas offered to give Pat a lift somewhere, and he said, no, I'm okay. And then Pat said, Lucas, do you want to lift somewhere? And he said, no, I'm okay. And then, as I said, Pat went out and didn't come home. You know, while he was out, just at a local cafe, licensed venue in Diamond Creek. It wasn't the pub, you know, it wasn't a hot spot. A fight broke out, and, you know, one of Pat's friends was being attacked when Pat did what we taught him to do, which was to look after your mates. Yeah. Don't go in throwing punches, just, you know, go and grab your friend and drag him away. And in that act of courage, if you like, when Pat went to drag his friend away, someone chose violence and, you know, chose to come in and throw a coward punch, hit Pat in the temple on the right-hand side of his head. He didn't get knocked out, and he didn't hit the ground, which is what a lot of people think happened to Pat. But in fact, he remained conscious after he was struck. He shook it off. You know, it was just like another knock that he may have received on the football field. Yeah. Shook it off and continued to gather his friends together and get them away from trouble. He walked back to his friend's place, just, you know, which was only a matter of 400 or 500 metres away from the venue. And about 2 hours later, he started complaining of a headache. He rang home, spoke to Robin, and just said he wasn't feeling well. Could Robin come and get him, pick him up? And she said, sure, where are you? And he said, I'm at Ash's place. Where's that? I'll text you his address. And he sent a word-perfect text message to Robin with the address.
Mm-hmm.
By the time Robin got there 5 minutes later, Pat was being carried down the stairs of the house out the front, and she thought, my goodness, what's happened? And, at that moment, it'd be fair to say that Pat was having a seizure. And, she said to his mates, has he drunk too much?
Yeah.
What's happened? And at that moment they said there'd been a fight, which was really surprising because, Pat just wasn't a fighter. And, at that stage they said, we think he got hit. But as I said, Pat had effectively lost consciousness. So she got the boys to call an ambulance. She called me and told me that, Pat wasn't well. Could I come? So I got there maybe 5 minutes later, just as an ambulance arrived. And, he was then taken ultimately to the Royal Melbourne Hospital. And, 2 days later, we turned his life support off. So,
gosh, that's something that no parent ever wants to be in that situation.
No.
Talk me through a little bit about, can you recall how you felt at that time? Not obviously that sort of that moment of him going to hospital as a parent, because it's ingrained in us just to protect your kids. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. And look, it's some of this is very fresh, if you like, and part of the reason why it's fresh is that about this time 9 years ago, we filmed a documentary. Which is a series of interviews with Robin and myself, with Emma and Lucas, and with bunches of Pat's friends. It was a recounting experience, if you like, of what happened.
Yeah.
So the video, which is available via our website for people who want to have a look at it, it's very powerful. It's a time capsule capturing that raw emotion only 4 months after Pat was killed. So I can sort of recount like I just did to you now, probably because I've seen that video so many times and recall what we said. But every time I talk about it, I think about the things. I can think about getting to the home in Diamond Creek there and seeing Pat, being, in Robin's arms in the gutter, just cradling him. And he was breathing very heavily. Pat was a bit of an asthmatic. And, I knew he'd have his puffer in his pocket. So, I tried to give him some Ventolin and just thinking maybe he was having an asthma attack.
Sure.
And never in my wildest dreams did I think, the outcome that we would get would be what it was. We thought, good, the Ambos are here. They'll look after him. He's probably just going to wake up with a headache in the morning and we'll bring him home, so... But all the things that happen in that moment, they come flooding back to you later and you realise, when the ambulance people said, the paramedics said, his pupils are fixed and dilated. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
I've heard it in the, on the movies and on TV shows, but ultimately it meant that there was no brain activity. So, they then took him to hospital. I said, okay, where are we going? Because we're in Diamond Creek. Where are we going? You would think that either the Northern or the Austin. They're the closest hospitals.
Closest, yeah.
Yeah. They said, no, we've taken him to the Royal Melbourne. And I thought, again, I didn't really think about it, but I thought, well, okay, that must be where the best support is. So let's go to the Royal Melbourne.
Yeah.
And then, I drove to the Royal Melbourne with 3 of Pat's friends in the car. And we got there and we waited and we waited and we waited. And then eventually the ambulance turned up, but there was no lights and sirens. The ambulance was going, slow. And I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe they're just taking extra special care.
Yeah.
But, again, you only learn these things later. You realise that there was no lights and sirens because Pat was already gone.
Right.
He'd already suffered an inoperable bleed on his brain. And there was nothing that they could do. So, when we get there, we got ushered into a special room. We're at the, where are we? We're at the emergency department of Royal Melbourne, hospital, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., probably about 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. And you're thinking, what are all these people doing here? Why are there police everywhere? And we just thought, oh, well, there must have been some incident there, not realising that they were there for Pat.
Right.
Because they'd obviously been messaged to say there's been a violence incident in Diamond Creek. This boy's on life support. We didn't know that at the time. They don't tell you this.
Yeah.
But, when eventually, we had some doctors come into us. So we got ushered into a private room. And we're thinking, well, that's, we didn't think anything, to say, but that's not normal. Normally you'd be sitting in the open area, but they ushered us into a private room. There was a policeman standing outside our door. All of these things that happen in the moment, and you think, my goodness, what's going on here? And then when, eventually a doctor and a nurse came in and they just said, we need to sit down. I thought, well, why? What do we need to sit down for? And they just insisted. And at that time, I think the first words were, I'm sorry. And you think, what are you sorry for? And they said, Pat's had a major bleed on his brain and we can't operate.
Wow.
You think, what do you mean you can't operate? This is the Royal Melbourne Hospital. There's doctors everywhere. There's surgeons. Just fix him. Yes, he might have taken someone might have punched him, but fix him. And they said, we can't fix him. It's inoperable. And then over the next, 36 hours, it's a blur in so many ways. But, we start talking to the homicide detectives. And I said, what are you here for? Homicide. Homicide's for people who've been killed. Pat's alive. He's on hooked up to machines and he's breathing.
Yeah.
But he wasn't breathing on his own. It was a life support machine that he was on. So,
gosh, Matt, I mean, you can't even begin to comprehend that. And I know, and you say it's 9.5 years ago, that it's still very raw for you, obviously, as a family. And then you've got your grief you're going through as your family and you're processing all this. And then, though, what you've done is you've taken this grief, and so many people would really struggle to be dealing with anything of this monumental emotions going on. And it was only like a month later you've established the Pat Cronin Foundation. Is that right?
Yeah, probably, to be honest. We saw Pat at the hospital on Sunday morning, and Monday night we came home without him, after his life support was turned off. And we opened, we thought, how are we ever going to go home? This was the home in fact, the room I'm sitting in at the moment was Pat's bedroom. It's just my home office.
Yeah.
And I feel his presence here all the time, and I love working in this space.
That's nice.
I'm sitting at a desk that there's still scribbles on this desk, from his studies.
Yeah.
So, but 2 days later, we opened the doors of our house and it was just people just came flooding in on the Tuesday. And, on the back veranda of our house, the seeds of the Pat Cronin Foundation were formed. Someone said to us, we need to do something. And, Robin and I have always been very community-minded, everything from parents and friends at school to the chairperson of the school board to the president of the football club secretary, parents and friends, you name it. We were into everything. And then in that moment, we said, well, why don't we form a foundation? We didn't know what we were going to do at that time, but we just thought we needed to do something.
Yeah.
And here we are, 9 and a bit years later and doing quite incredible things.
And you absolutely are. You're touching so many people with the story and the messaging as well. And so, but how did you find that journey? Did you find that helped yours and Robin's grief to process what was happening? Or do you think, looking back now, that it was a little bit of it just helped you move on and that grief came later? Or what do you think? Was it, I mean, there's no right or wrong way of doing it, is there? We all know that.
No. Look, I mean, grief is, our grief was a very public grief. We when we left the Royal Melbourne Hospital, we left via underground hallways because the media were camped out the front, and we were a bit scared of the media, to be honest. We thought, we've lost our 19-year-old son. Why do we want to be? We're not another news story, but while we're sitting in the hospital, it was the headline news about what happened to this 19-year-old boy from Eltham. And we thought, that's not us, that's someone else. It's always someone else. It's not you. So, our grief was very public, and then throw on top of that a court process to go through.
Absolutely.
It's just hard to get your head around. And part of the reason why we do what we do is we hope that no one else ever has to go through what we've gone through, because it's horrific in every which way. I think there's definitely a shared journey with, we've met so many others who've lost children for different reasons, some violent like Pat, but others through medical episodes and whatever. And, I can tell you, some of Robin's closest friends now are mothers who've lost children as well.
Yeah.
And you can't begin to understand until it's actually happened to you.
Absolutely, yeah. Which that's a beautiful thing in itself, isn't it? You're attracting the same people and feeling that you can form your own sort of safety net, if you like, together and be there for each other. Now, the foundation's message, as you said, is all about ending the coward punch. But years gone by, it was always known as the King hit, which was that the foundation that really put the coward punch into everyday life to make it, because obviously it sort of takes away that negative connotation, doesn't it? It reflects the coward's punch. It reflects more like the shame rather than the glory of that senseless act. Was that something that you guys brought into the public domain, or was it always out there?
I think what we've done is continued to run with that that baton, if you like. Look, there's others before us who've coined the phrase "a coward punch." Yeah. But I'm at pains to call it what it is, which it is a coward punch. It's not a king hit. It's not a one punch. It's a coward punch, and it's a cowardly act. So let's put the shame on it that needs to be brought on that. Yeah. So we've just continued on, So as I said, organisations like Danny Green Stop the Coward Punch campaign have run with that. Yep. And I'm happy to give him credit, for what he's done in raising that awareness. We just go about things a little bit differently with what we do, particularly in the education space. And I guess ultimately, a message of optimism, which, in the circumstances you might think, oh my God, how can we possibly be talking optimistically? But I want Lucas and Emma to be safe. I want their partners to be safe. I want Riley, our grandson, and our future grandson to be safe in this world. And therefore, I believe we can make a change. That's what we believe at the foundation, is that we can stop this. It's a bit like the road toll campaign. What's an acceptable number? Yeah. Well, zero.
One. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Zero is the acceptable number. So let's do what we can, to make the world a better place. And, we do that in a way, by sharing the worst possible story that any parent could ever deal with, which is the loss of your child. But in sharing Pat's story, the feedback we get from schools, from the students, from anyone who we talk to, they say, oh my God, if this could happen to someone like Pat, this could happen to anyone, because I'm always really proud to talk about Pat, because he was a good kid. He loved his footy, but he was a really smart kid as well. He went to uni. He studied hard at Whitefriars in year 12 and ended up with an ATAR of over 90. He got a scholarship at La Trobe University, and he was studying health science with the view to become a physio. So his life was set to help others, no doubt about it. And I know in a way he is still helping others. It's not the way we would want him to be helping. But,
No.
if we, by sharing his story, if we can stop someone else, if we can give a young person the skills to deal with conflict in a meaningful way and keep them safe, then Pat's continuing to do his job.
That's a nice way to look at it. That's really beautiful. And you say you talk a lot to schools, and I know we've just spoken offline that my sons were lucky enough to be part of one of your presentations last week at their school. Obviously, it's really important for awareness and education for kids. Are we just talking boys and men,
No.
or is it girls too? Because I think there is that misconception, isn't it, that it's not, it's just boys. So you go to schools, you talk to girls and boys.
Yeah.
So talk me through what that looks like if you go to a school. What kind of does an education program or awareness program look like?
Yeah, sure. And as I said, it probably the heart of everything that we do, and it is absolutely aimed at a broad audience, right? Boys and girls, men and women. So because it takes a village to raise a child is what I'll say, right?
Yeah.
And, and I think where the connection comes in fact, some of the best feedback we've had have been from girls' schools, right? Where they say, we don't hear about this stuff enough, right? And, they've all got boyfriends or brothers or cousins or, male figures in their lives. And, through sharing this, I always say when I'm talking to a mixed audience, I said, girls, this is for you, right? Because you know what? You're the smart ones. The boys, the boys that we talk about a scenario where a girl and a boy might be walking down the street holding hands, okay? The boy's thinking, how good's this? I'm holding a girl's hand, right?
Yeah.
I might get a kiss later. That's what they're thinking.
Yeah.
The girl is thinking, oh my God, what are all the risks around here? They're looking around. They got their radar up. They're observing that there's 4 people walking towards them, 4 men walking towards them who look aggressive.
Yeah.
And the boy's just oblivious to all of this. So the girl can play a part by just holding the boy's hand, just saying, let's just cross to the other side of the road, or let's just turn around, and all of those sorts of things. So there's absolute lessons there for the girls as well when we're doing our presentations. So, but ultimately we share a story about what happened to Pat. We share 10 minutes of the half an hour documentary where we tell pretty much what I just said to you before, but there's vision with that. We get the interviews with Lucas and with Emma and with Pat's mates. And these are all boys who, boys and girls who are, 18, 19 when we filmed this. So many of them are now married. So many of them are now having kids. And, breaks our heart to think that Pat's not part of their lives anymore. He still is, but just in a different way.
Yeah.
And, it's through that, so we talk about the consequence piece for the victim. We then talk about the consequence for the offender. We don't, because yes, there was jail. Yes, there was financial penalties. But was there remorse? Sadly, no, none. But for me, there's almost like, what's the worst thing you can do to a kid these days is unfriend them. I don't want to be your friend anymore. So, who wants to be the friend of someone who killed a 19-year-old boy?
Yeah.
And I think about, this guy who killed Pat was 33. Wow. He had a 3-year-old child. How's that boy growing up knowing that his dad killed someone?
Yeah.
And if he didn't know, everyone would be letting him know.
Yeah.
So, he'd now be 12. And imagine the grief that boy is experiencing in his life because of what his dad did. So we talk about consequences, but then most importantly, we then talk about strategies, which is to say, what can you do? What is your, so we talk about them being our Be Wise strategies.
Yeah.
And we take the kids through, 3, 4, 5 practical strategies that they can take away, work out which is their Be Wise strategy that they can use for the rest of their life. So, I'm not exaggerating when I say the strategies we give in that hour presentation are life-saving.
Yeah.
right? Absolutely life-saving, and they're a life skill that can follow them for the rest of their life. So it's just so important, to share that and get the good, look after the good guys, as I say.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do. When we spoke, Robin and I spoke at Whitefriars on Friday. Don't know whether you boys will remember the words that I said, but I said, you are all good young men. And don't let anyone tell you that you're not, because we beat down the boys too much. We've got to lift them up. We've got to give them those positive experiences in their life so that they become the leaders of the future. They become the Pats, be like Pat.
Yeah.
And the world will be a better place. Yeah.
Sounds simple, doesn't it? And
it does, yeah.
It's, I think, like you say, the more you talk about it, the more awareness you raise. And I was looking at the statistics on your website, and I'm sure it's more than this, but it says you've done presentations across 400 schools and shared Pat's story with over 80,000 students across Australia in that time.
That was just last year.
Yeah.
So
yeah, right.
So,
I was going to say, when is that? Yeah.
Yeah. So that website needs to. We are revamping our website.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got a meeting after this. Talking about our revamp. So our total numbers now, we've reached 350,000 people.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Every state and territory. Yeah. And the total number of schools would be well over 1,000 schools that we've reached.
Yeah. Okay.
Next week, for example, I think yesterday we did a presentation at Eltham High School. Yeah. Next week we're presenting in Hobart. So, earlier this year we were in Port Hedland, in Toowoomba. We were, we've been Townsville, here, there and everywhere. So we're truly becoming a national organisation.
And it's not just you doing this. You presumably by now have a team of people that go out and do all this.
Yeah. Look, we have a staff of 6. We have 8 facilitators. So our facilitators are the ones who go and do the presentations that run the programs in the schools. Yeah. We've got online e-learning for primary school kids. We've got a primary school program.
Yeah, terrific.
Yeah. So we can't start early enough. Through COVID, we had 3 beautiful storybooks written for primary school age children, and they are just beautiful stories. And there's a central character in each of the books called Patch,
nice.
which was one of Pat's nicknames.
That's nice.
And our owl symbol, our Be Wise owl, the significance of the owl is that Pat drew that owl.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's good. Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah. So when you look at the foundation owl, you'll say, what's that all about? Well, I literally found the Spirax folder after Pat passed away with that sketch in it. And that's lovely. So it's our owl, and in our storybooks we've got a character called Skipper the Owl, and Pat was the captain of his footy team, and his nickname there was Skipper. So
that's nice.
There's so many lovely little stories woven through. Yeah, but there's stories about optimism. They are stories about consequences and rough play to start with. But there's a beautiful phrase that came out of those books, which is be wise, think carefully, act kindly. Yeah. And if we all did that, well, again, the world's just going to be a better place.
Gosh, I think some adults could learn that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, goodness me. How many times I've thought, when you watch the news and I think, my God, be wise, think carefully, act kindly, please.
Simple. Take it back to simplicity. Yeah, that's... And now, do you get any government funding, or are you just purely funded by...
Yeah, look, it's a combination of everything is what I'd say. We do get a little bit of funding from the state government, so we're grateful for that, but it's nowhere near enough.
Yeah.
One of the biggest issues that I have, my professional life, I'm a financial planner. So
that helps.
It does help a little bit, but it means I've got to knock on a lot of doors and ask for a lot of contributions wherever we can. So it's a combination of a bit of government funding. We haven't got any money from federal government yet, which is really disappointing. So, but we're working on it. We've got a number of corporate partners that help us out. We have fundraising events like our ball. We've got a massive walk that comes up in November, which is a great opportunity for people to get involved, help raise vital funds. And, we have a raffle tomorrow I said to someone this morning, I said, I did something really exciting yesterday. I bought a new car. It wasn't for me. It was for our raffle.
Oh, for the
And
raffle. How cool.
yeah. And tomorrow, we're literally handing over the keys to a brand new RAV4 to the winner of our most recent raffle. So really exciting.
Lovely. That's exciting. That's
yeah.
nice. And look, and I suppose with that, with any purpose-driven organisation like this, there are peaks and troughs and challenges and highlights. What have been like the sort of the standout highlights and the sort of the troughs where you've just sort of got through it, but have been the big learning?
Yeah. Look, so many. Yeah, it's hard to sort of focus on the highlights, I've got to say, because one thing that we always come back to is that the foundation exists because Pat died. And, that when you focus on that, it makes you really sad.
Yeah.
But to think that so many people know Pat's name because we've shared his story, and it's a story that shouldn't happen. And it is a story that can be stopped. It is senseless in every which way, and it didn't need to happen. So if we can share that, as I said, I'm doing my best as his dad to embarrass him. We think that he's looking down on us and saying, Dad, Mum, just shut up, will you? And stop talking about me, but it's so important. We have a series of intention statements in the foundation that are really the backbone, if you like, fundamentals behind the foundation. And the number one intention statement we have is to honour Pat. And if everything we do, having this podcast interview with you today, is honouring Pat, sharing his story, is honouring him. We've got a profile. The media does come to us when there's incidents of violence like this.
Yeah.
And, through that, earlier this year when Noah Bolter, the Richmond player, did what he did, the media came to us. And I did an interview with Jackie Felgate on 3AW, sitting at this chair that I'm sitting at, talking to you, talking to Jackie about what happened with Noah Bolter and how the penalty didn't fit the crime and things like that. And then Channel 9 was out the front of our house, half an hour later filming. But out of that, the optimism was I reached out to Andrew Dillon at the AFL and Robin and I had a meeting in AFL House with Andrew Dillon and his big wigs. And one of the most empowering things I've ever done in my life was I started that meeting to say, Andrew, how can we help you?
Yeah. Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Which was pretty, humble little charity like we are, talking about our son, going to the mega business at the AFL and said, how can we help you? Because you need help.
Yeah.
And we're developing a really good relationship with the AFL. So I'll just say, watch this space. I think there's some great things that can come because they've got enormous reach. And if they can help us go from 350,000 to 1 million people, then, in quick time, then that's how they can help us. Yeah. And then doors start opening. So, it's that's been a very proud moment, let's say, to have that.
That's so good. And I don't expect you even thought much about what this would become when you first started to establish a foundation and how it's grown and moving forward. So that's one thing that's in the pipeline. What else have you got on the horizon for the Pat Cronin Foundation?
Yeah, look, I mean, it is an aim at the moment to reach 1 million, and we want to reach there as quickly as we can. So that's probably our next milestone goal. Ultimately, we do have a program at the moment that runs from prep all the way through to year 12. Yep. So it's just a case of how many, I want every, I guess a real stretch target would be that every school in Australia hears Pat's story. Yeah. Right. And, to do that, it costs money. I would love the foundation to get to the point where we could go to a school and say, this is on us, right? Where we've got funding behind us to share Pat's story with you at no cost to you. Yeah. Because when schools, what does break my heart is when a school says to me, we'd love to have you, but we haven't got the money.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, it does cost money to run the foundation. We have staff, we have presenters.
Yeah.
I'm the unpaid CEO, and our board are voluntary, and we've got some wonderful volunteers who help us, but it still costs us money to run. So, and that's why I need to talk to as many people as I can, because there's someone probably listening to our podcast today who might be able to help us on our journey.
And
it
let's
may
hope
be,
so.
yeah, whether they've got the money themselves or they know someone who's got some money who wants to help a really worthy cause, then we'd love to have a chat to them.
No, that's great. And you're an incredible man, because you don't just run the foundation, do you? You've actually work in
Full-time.
a business full time, and is it your own business as well?
Yeah. I'm a partner in our financial planning business, which we've been running for 20 odd years, and when I can, I try to. I have a target each week to ride at least 120 kilometres on my bike. So go to the gym a couple of times a week. Play with my grandson Riley whenever I get the opportunity.
That's
so.
Nice.
As they say in life, if you want a job done, give it to a busy person. So,
isn't that the truth?
Yeah, but I think cycling is my, it helps. There's no doubt about it. Physically, it helps me, but mentally, it helps me keep myself sorted. If you had a look at my desk space at the moment, you would say, "Is that sorted?" And I said, "Yeah, I know where everything.
You know where everything is.
I know where everything is. It's all good. So, but as long as my mind is sorted, but I'm never too far away from having sort of post-it notes around. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes I wake up and I start thinking, and then I get up and I'll find my pen and I'll find a post-it note. And I'll write a list, and then I can go back to sleep. And we take the challenge for the next day and move on.
I love that. You're very motivating, and there's so many people who can take a lot away from you, and that's what we call someone who leaves a glitter trail. And you have you and Robin are leaving a huge glitter trail. And on that, obviously, the glitter effect, it's called the glitter effect because I'm a firm believer that everyone's got glitter to spread with purpose and heart, but you obviously don't get there without people who have shown you the light, or have supported you, have offered you wisdom along the way. Clearly, Pat is what I would say your main glitter king in this instance. Is there anyone else, any other glitter kings and queens that have got you to where you are today?
Yeah, there's a couple that I can think of. One high profile, one very much behind the scenes. But our high profile one is Matthew Richardson.
Okay.
And Richo from we're a Richmond family. And, Richo, when Pat was little, in Oz Kick Days, he had number 12 on his back. And when the foundation was formed, we thought we need to get it'd be nice to have some high-profile ambassadors. And, we thought, but there was a criteria for the ambassadors, and they had to be a much-loved character. And, with Richo, he's definitely that. Yeah. And he's just an incredible human being. What you see on the TV is what you get in real life. He is just a genuine good guy, and we're very proud to call him our number one ambassador, but we're also very proud to call him a friend. So
that's nice.
And when I randomly, here I am, little humble Matt, Pat's dad, and I get a text message, and it's from Richo. He's just a random text message. So he's awesome. So we love him. The other one who's a little bit less high profile is someone that we met when in our darkest day, and that's Father Michael Gallagher. And when we were in the Royal Melbourne Hospital, we realised that, and we were told that Pat wasn't going to survive. We thought, well, Pat's been baptised in the church and the Catholic Church, and we thought, well, he needs to have the last rites before we turn his life support off. So we reached out to Whitefriars, and we thought maybe Father Paul, who was the principal at the school when Pat was first started. We knew he'd retired, but we thought, well, he lived in Middle Park, so we thought he might be able to come. Anyway, it turns out someone got on to Father Paul, and he was in Sydney. But he said, look, try this fella here, Father Michael Gallagher, and he might be able to help. So Father Michael was a 29-year-old priest and a Whitefriars old boy.
Okay.
And someone called him, and he happened to be the floor below us in the Royal Melbourne Hospital.
Oh, no way.
When his phone rang. And within 5 minutes, he was up sitting with us, and he is just a beautiful man, right? We needed someone at that time, and there's no doubt about it in my mind. God sent him to us. And, you know, we're not super duper religious people, but there was greater things at work that day. And Michael's become a great friend. He sat with us. He prayed for Pat and he prayed for us. And, you know, eventually 2 weeks later, he presided over Pat's funeral at Whitefriars, you know, and there was 2,500 people at Pat's funeral at Whitefriars that day. You know, Pat will go down for those kids as a bit of a legend at Whitefriars because all the kids got a day off school. They closed the school, you know, and, you know, but Michael, given all the anger, you know, that was pent up because of what happened to Pat, Michael's words that day were just incredible and very healing for a community that was suffering. And he just nailed it. And, you know, he's become a very close friend of our family now. And, we can only ever thank him. We can't ever thank him enough.
Oh, that's lovely. And I'm a firm believer too, Matt, that people come into your life for a reason and they are there to help you with or support you with whatever you're going through at that point as well. So I think that's that's just confirmed that. Matt, we're coming to the end now.
Yeah.
People, and I can't believe people won't want to find out more about Pat Cronin Foundation after this chat. If they want to find out more or how to support, where do they go? What's the best place to go?
Sure. Just go to our website, patcroninfoundation.org.au. Google search Pat Cronin Foundation. It'll come up. Follow the link. So the only tricky bit is it's a .org.au. But Pat Cronin Foundation, there's an enormous amount of information on the website. Some of it needs to be updated. By the time this goes to air, it will be updated and people are going to say, wow, have a look at this website. I can find everything that I need at my fingertips. We are a registered charity. So, you know, all donations are tax deductible to the foundation. You know, it costs us roughly, the school roughly $1,000 to run a presentation. So, you know, to have us come out and talk to an average audience size of about 150 kids. So, you know, if there's someone out there who would say, oh, I'd love for you guys to come to our school, you know, get them to contact us via the website, you know, make a donation of $1,000. It's going to educate, you know, 150 kids. So there's many ways. We've got a big walk coming up in November. 23rd of November is the Be Wise Walk. So it's a great opportunity, you know, to get people together. And even if you can't make it to Lower Plenty, which is where we do the walk, you know, you can do your own walk to anywhere. You know, walk in the back. You know, that's what COVID taught us. You know, it was literally a walk to anywhere, walking around the streets of Eltham or wherever you might be. And, you know, we've had people walk all over the world, you know, on that weekend thinking of Pat. So, please follow us on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn. I don't know how to use it, but we're on it. So, you know, just follow us and, you know, keep us in your thoughts and just think of Pat, you know, and if someone out of this can share Pat's story with someone else, then that's a great thing to have done. Yeah.
Beautiful. Matt Cronin, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for taking the time out today. I know you're a very busy man. And thank you for so generously sharing your story, your grief, your wisdom, and most importantly, Pat's legacy, which will live on for many years to come. Your strength, humility, and unwavering dedication to creating a safer future for others is nothing short of inspiring. And it's something that many fathers and mothers and parents or anyone in their family, if something like this happened, couldn't even fathom doing. So hats off to you. I know that the work of the Pat Cronin Foundation has already changed and saved so many lives, and I have no doubt that your words on the podcast will continue that ripple today. In the face of unimaginable heartbreak, you've chosen to lead with kindness, education, and purpose, and that to me is the very essence of spreading glitter, using your light even in darkness to guide others. It was an absolute privilege to have you on the show and an honour to help share your message. Thank you for all that you do and for reminding us of the power of walking away and the strength that lies in compassion. I wish you, your family and the Pat Cronin Foundation all the very best for the future. And please keep in touch, Matt. We wish you all the very best. Thank you for coming on today.
Thanks so much, Kate. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for joining me, Kate Gniel, on The Glitter Effect. If you've loved this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep showing up, making an impact, and sprinkling that glitter wherever you go. Bye for now.